We are recording for our first episode of our new project, which I guess we're just calling the Unwritten Earths Symposium Podcast.
So we need an intro, right? Welcome to the Unwritten Earths Symposium Podcast. Mm-hmm. I'm not Nathan D. Paoletta.
And I'm not Epidiah Ravachol. But together we are the Unwritten Earths Symposium.
Yeah, we should talk about what we're doing here.
I have this thought that's like an Enter the Colosseum kind of like enter the symposium.
Yes, I like that.
Yeah, a new challenger enters the symposium.
So I'm not Nathan D. Paoletta, but I can tell you a little something about Nathan D. Paoletta. He's the gentleman sitting on the other side of the mic from me. He's a tabletop role-playing game designer who's been at it for decades now, along with myself. I don't know when we met. It must have been like Dreamation.
I think we've chased this down a couple times trying to nail it down, but Dreamation... Probably 2007, I think, was when we... Possibly 2006, something in that realm.
Fast approach. I mean, by the time you hear this, most likely it's been at least 20 years.
Right. And in case you're curious, I'm not Epidiah Ravachol, but if you wanted to know more about him, he's a tabletop role-playing game designer, innovator of methods and strategies, I would say, in the tabletop space. Has been at it for at least as long as I have, if not longer. Mm-hmm. Dean of our East Coast college, while I'm Dean of the West Coast over here, I suppose.
Yeah. Every place has an East and a West Coast, so we're good with that.
I think we should probably say a little bit about ourselves because we shouldn't assume that people know who we are. We actually are probably safe to assume that most people currently in the indie game design space don't know who we are.
Yes.
We should probably have that as a baseline for the conversation, at least our first couple episodes.
Can I share a story with you that happened very recently? Couple weeks ago, I was at my friendly local gaming store, shout out Greenfield Games. I was doing a signing of a game that I had written a couple decades ago called Dread. This is the horror role-playing game that uses Jenga instead of dice. And listeners may be aware of that. But here's why I bring this up. Not to be like humble brag. It's not even humble brag yet. I'm doing a signing of a game that I wrote a while ago that people might know about. But at the signing, I met a guy. I met a stranger who came up to buy a copy and get it signed. And he was excited because he did not realize that the game had been created or authored by anyone. He thought it was just a tradition that people did, right? Like he saw people playing it, streaming it, and just thought, oh, this is just a thing some people do when they do a horror role-playing game, which I
that's
love.
Interesting, yeah.
I absolutely love.
There's just a thing where sometimes you use Jenga instead of dice.
Yeah, right? Like, if you're going to do scary, why not just use Jenga instead of dice? So what made me think about this is what we were just talking about. Like, we each have a game that precedes us, right? Mine is obviously, the aforementioned Dread, but you, Worldwide Wrestling is your big name game. Do you get recognized as, like, are people like, is your game more recognizable than you? I guess is the question I'm asking.
Yeah, I think so. Well, I don't think it's disassociated from me in that same way. But, when I meet someone and we introduce, like, so for example, I was recently at Big Bad Con.
Yes.
Down in San Francisco way, which is a great time. And I did not schedule a lot of stuff. I was running a play test of a game, and I was running a game that I wanted to run for a long time, The Clay That Woke by Paul Sega.
Yes.
So if you're thinking about Minotaurs, you know who you are. But I wasn't, for example, I was not running Worldwide Wrestling, and I was not like doing a panel or like any like promotional-y things. I was just kind of like there to play, and it was my first time at the convention, so just to hang out and kind of get the vibe and see some people, meet some names I've only known online, etc. I did have the experience multiple times, again, not humble brag, but that's what we're talking about right now, of meeting someone, introducing by name, and then having like either a third party, or we're talking about games we've done, right? Or a third person who's introducing us is like, oh, and he did Worldwide Wrestling. And the person goes, oh, And it's either
Yes.
either my friend loves that game, which I think is a wonderful response, because I don't pretend that everyone should like wrestling. But I appreciate that if someone has a friend who likes wrestling, that's how they hear about it. Like, I'm like, that's how wrestling should work. You should have a buddy who's really into wrestling.
Yeah, everyone should have a wrestle buddy.
I have buddies who are more into wrestling than I am, for sure. Anyway, or like I've heard of it, or I know that it's staking out that space, right? For better or for worse, in our community, if you're interested in wrestling and RPGs, it's the one that people say, "Oh, have you checked out?" I mean, to the point where I think there are games I think that are like, "No, I'm trying not to be that game," right? Which is good, which is healthy. That's how we should be.
Yeah. I feel like not to get all.
This is our podcast about our games, so we get to talk about it.
Well, I was just going to say, I do feel guilty when people tell people to have they checked out Dread, right? There's a pool of wrestling games out there, but there's a vast pool of horror games. Yeah. And in the beginning, I mean, I guess it didn't really happen to me much, but if I would be like, have you checked out Call of Cthulhu? Like, of course. Like, I know of that. But like I think it's great that, I love the place that it occupies. But I don't like being that thing, that happens. Like, you're like, oh, I'm working on a game. And then like somebody is like, starts naming games in that zone. Yeah, that's like,
this is a thing that I think we're always kind of dealing with, is the simultaneous impulse to refer people to prior art that's relevant to what they're doing, but not shut down inquiry by saying, oh, that already exists.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's a tough line to do. And like, people are just excited that they've played games, that's great. I want people to be excited that they play games. That is like baseline what I've built my life on at this point. If that doesn't exist, we're in trouble.
Right.
So I guess this is by way of introducing ourselves as accomplished game designers of some note. I guess is
in our own way. Yeah, I think if you're not familiar with us, which again, I hope people who aren't familiar with us are going to listen. But we're both we both managed to figure out a way to do game design and publishing as our full-time jobs. So that's great. I think in both of our cases, we have a lot of associated privilege that we've been able to build on to do that, including spouses that have health insurance, for example.
That's vital.
But also, general socioeconomic status. The specific type of community that we started out in, and how that grew with the internet, comparing the indie game design scene of 2002, or, I mean, to make a nice date, 2004 to 2024.
Yeah.
A lot has changed, and we happened to be there. I wouldn't say at the beginning, but we happened to be there with enough time that has elapsed that we have seen a lot of the changes and been able to evolve.
It's become kind of old hat for me to like kind of list out, but like when I started, print on demand wasn't a deal. PDFs and buying PDFs was not a thing. People like who would spend money on a file.
There were years where a recurring, so everyone knows about the recurring discourse, right? Like if you're online, like every year there's a new crop of whatever. I'm not trying to put anyone on blast, but a recurring crop of stuff like, should you compare your game to D&D, or should you pretend that D&D doesn't exist because it really isn't relevant to what we're doing, right? Like that's a perennial, or not pretend it doesn't exist, but should you put yourself in conversation with the big dog, or should you stake out your own space, right? That's a perennial conversation. For a while, a perennial conversation was, why would I spend money on a digital file?
Yeah.
And even if I do spend money on it, I can't imagine spending more than X. And that started at like $5.
Even less than that, I think. Yeah, and then like print on demand, crowdfunding via Kickstarter or Patreon or whatever didn't exist. Social media was very different.
Yeah, transitioning from forums to social media.
And then away from social media. We've like in the 20 years since 2004 and now.
I mean, we're back to forums. That would be ideal.
Yeah.
If we could just have a forum, that would be great. But unfortunately, I think the traffic, the audience pattern doesn't support it anymore.
I have somewhere on my shelves, I am sitting right now in the Airy, which is a part of the gaming library in my house. It's in my attic. On one of my shelves, I have a CD-ROM that they gave away at Gen Con in those early years that like has a prototype of, I think, Drive-Thru RPG on it. Like the web store with like just like 24 games to see previews of or something like that. Or most people can't even use a CD-ROM anymore on their computers. Like, anyways, we're old.
Well, so I think one reason we're talking about it is we're kind of speedrunning through the conversation that we have had privately over the last, I mean, certainly the last year, but really over the last however many years we've been talking regularly because we've had a different podcast to talk about because we were, doing 200 a day and talking about the Rockford Files for the last 7 years.
Yes.
So what we're doing now is kind of speedrunning part of our conversation to get to, and what are we doing next as designers, right?
Yes.
Like, here's where we're at. We've had similar but not identical experiences.
Right.
We have similar but I think different game design aesthetics.
Yeah. We appreciate each other's game design aesthetics.
Like Epi is a better game designer than me because he can do things that I can't even wrap my head around. And then I'm like, oh, this is brilliant, for example.
You're making me blush. But I mean, like, damn it.
Gotcha. Which is why I was like, hey, Epi, I need your help.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? We're not stepping on each other's toes at any point, which is an interesting thing in a dance partner.
Ideal, in fact.
Ideal, yes. I mean, like to extend the metaphor and just torture it a little bit more, we're at least dancing to the same beat. Maybe not the same song, but we're we're teaming up is really what's happening here. We're teaming up on this podcast. Obviously, if you're listening to it, you're hearing two people, not one.
Unless I've done a very bad job editing.
And we're also teaming up to do what we are calling the Unwritten Earths Symposium endeavor.
It's our new publishing house.
Yeah. Neither NDP Design nor Dig a Thousand Holes Publishing are going by the wayside. We just have this joint venture here where we have some ideas that work well in this overlap of our skills and our interests, and we're going to pursue them forthwith.
Creating this new entity by opening the symposium, it gives us a really productive place to collaborate.
Yeah,
for the long term, and not on like an individual project or like whatever. But it also gives us a place that as we generate new things, we can hopefully invite all of you to come join us, experience them, see if you like them, and hold a space both for like making games and selling them and keeping us alive in the capitalist hellscape that is our world. But also part of the intention that is underlying this podcast in particular is to hold a space for other people to also come and talk about game design.
Yeah.
Because I think that's been really key to both of our development as designers is being in spaces that were intentionally about talking about games and how do we get them into people's hands and how do we watch them play?
Yes. Yeah.
Let's make games with the assumption that we can get them into the hands of people who will be really excited about playing them. And how do we make that the best possible process?
We were earlier talking about our privileges, and one of our privileges is that we both lucked into some pretty decent communities when it came to, in those early days, to supporting each other, playing each other's games, and feedback cycles of like the best kind, where like, people are excited about what you're doing and you're excited about what they're doing. And yeah.
And it's intentionally, I think, at least for now, I use the phrase holding the space very specifically because we don't have like a 10-point plan, right? It's more like we have a couple spheres in which we are playing. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm misspeaking on something or saying something where like, I don't think we talked about that. But our aims here, one, with the podcast, is to have a place for us to trick each other into making a game that we wouldn't otherwise make ourselves. The original idea was like, what happens, like, how do we make a game together? And that might be the outcome. Mm-hmm. But it also might be the outcome that I get Epi to make me a game that I want him to make, and he gets me to make him a game. That might be the outcome. We'll see how it goes. But the podcast is for us to talk about our game design, generate new ideas, and find new paths to go down, and also adventure into our archives and find some of the glittering gems that lay beneath the surface that we both know are there and have never had the time or opportunity to dig up.
Yeah.
So that's part one. Mm-hmm. So overlapping with the podcast will be the Discord, the Unwritten Earths Symposium Discord version, which will have some patron only special stuff because we're going to have the Patreon, and that will allow you access to the Discord, but it'll also be open to non-patrons. Yeah. And that's going to be a space for talking about games, but specifically talking about games people are working on, finding playtesters.
Yeah, people to play your games.
Yeah. You have a better sense of what Discord kind of is like. What is the Discord looking like? What's the plan for the Discord right now?
God, I wish I could remember who pointed this out to me, but there's many different definitions of the word play. The most interesting ones in the context of the other ones is the freedom of movement that's allowed. How much play there is between gears, or it's that little extra bit of movement that they can do that isn't like colliding with each other. Mm-hmm. The looseness is the play. That's the sort of play that we're going to focus on here with the Discord. What we'd like to do is just invite people to come along and share what games that they're excited about, what games that they're building, and it will change as we grow, as we learn what works and what doesn't work. Mm-hmm. The design goal here is to create a space again. Give me a moment.
Yeah.
I would like to build a community that plays other people's games. In the early days, we all played each other's games. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we still do that, but like that was a huge thing. Like Emily ran JiffyCon, which is just a convention to bring people together to play the games that they were writing. Like that's all it was. It wasn't a huge convention. It was a nice little local one, but everyone there knew that they were playing a game that somebody there had crafted or a friend of a friend had crafted, like kind of thing. That's my vision for the Discord, is a community that's around playing each other's games for that experience. Like I want to be also very clear, like not let's figure out how we're going to be the best play testers. It's not, you just want people playing games.
Right. And they don't necessarily need to be like new games or whatever, but we want it to be a place where you can bring something you're working on, have people play it, and then a year later when you publish it, whatever venue you use to publish it, there's already a community of people who are like, oh, I remember playing that, and here's why it was so great.
Yes. Recently, somebody asked me, I had been to a non-gaming convention, and afterwards people had Con Drop, and I was like, oh, that's Con Drop. And they're like, wait, what? What's Con Drop? And I'm like, well, this is afterwards the feeling of just kind of morose sadness because you don't see your friends anymore that you saw at the convention, but also because the convention itself was an exciting time and there was a lot of stress leading into it, and then I started talking about what it was like back when we all released our games at the same convention, because again, before crowdfunding, it was basically you would release it at Gen Con.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were all on this same yearly cycle of stress and joy and excitement and all of that. Anyways, the Discord.
The Discord will not be that.
Will not be that. Yes. But we want to I want to create that that atmosphere, not the stress and all that, but just the we're excited to play each other's game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not really resolved. It's more like we have a plan. We're going to put it together. Hopefully some of you fun listeners will want to come check it out, and we will go from there. We do want it to be part of this idea of having a productive place for people to talk about games that they're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And have some persistence, so that you end up seeing out over time how people's work develops from having that kind of feedback.
Yeah. All of this is a very 10,000 foot, bird's eye view of the thing. Mm-hmm. Diving in closer. We're game designers. We've designed games for ourselves. Little things to play during this podcast, because we can't just have a script.
Right. Yeah. We're not comfortable scripting, but we're also not comfortable just talking. We have to have something. Well, there was one other thing we're doing for the symposium, which is we're going to have our annual.
Yes. Right. In the beginning, we were talking about, we did this podcast. We thought maybe this might be a thing where we create a game together. And then we jumped the gun. Mm-hmm. We went beyond that. We decided we had another project that we wanted to do together. And this is the Adventure and Hobbyist Annual 2025, which will be the first one. These are going to be scenarios and other material that you can use in games. They're going to be, I'll say, system agnostic.
Yeah, we're not sure if that's a great, I feel like there's a term that's either out there that we, so if you know of a term that sounds more like what we're talking about, please let us know. But yeah, system as agnostic is kind of the closest that we have right now.
They are aimed at our particular games because these are the things that we're working on and thinking about, but we want to leave them open for so for instance, if you're a fan of Worldwide Wrestling and you're well, should I get the annual? Is there going to be any wrestling content? There's going to be some wrestling content.
Yeah. The kind of, I think the thing we hit on that I think is really exciting in terms of making system agnostic material that is still for certain games is basically taking each one, and it's here's the basic thing, here's the one that you've described, I think, most fully so far, is the alien landing at the VFW hall, right?
Yes.
Where it's let's say that there's this one night where this starship full of aliens of various
space gladiators.
Yeah, space gladiators, thank you, specifically, lands out in the boonies somewhere. It's the same night as the big local wrestling show at the VFW hall. Mm-hmm. And then the situation can evolve in lots of different ways. Obviously, that has a wrestling hook, it's a wrestling show, sure, but you could also do it as a horror scenario,
right,
where the wrestler that you thought you were going to be watching suddenly bursts tentacles out and comes after the bartender or something, right? So the scenario has here's what's going on, here's characters, here's a location, here's some events, right? And then if you want to play with a wrestling vibe, then here's how you might want to apportion. Here's who the player characters are, and here's the matches you might want to have. And obviously, if you have Worldwide Wrestling, you should use it to play this.
Yes.
Or you could play with a horror vibe and use Dread, or you could play it with the comedy vibe and use Inspectors or something, right?
Yeah.
So the idea is we'd give each one vibes. And again, I'm not sure if that's the best way to describe it, but it might be the best way to describe it.
Yeah. I mean, different angles, different ways to go with the story, and explore that to some extent, and then leave some for you to explore.
Yeah. But have some specific support in the writing about here's either what to add or how to emphasize these elements for the horror vibe, for the urban fantasy vibe, or for the punch 'em up adventure vibe.
Right. Yeah.
For a specific scenario. So you can kind of run with it with either your game of choice, or some of those are going to map to games that we also publish. So that if you want to do we're on the far side of the moon and the space portals are opening, you can do that with Swords Without Master, for example.
Right. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about the annual. You'll hear more about as things unfold. We'll obviously talk about different specifics about it as the podcast goes on.
Yeah, we're not going to use the podcast just to talk about the annual, but it's one of our courses. We have in the symposium we have these these different majors, right? And so the podcast is one major, publishing our games is a major, the Discord's a major, and the annual is a major.
Going along with this sort of collegiate theme, we have assigned ourselves homework.
Yeah, so let's do the podcast, because we've talked about all the other stuff, but that's not what we're here to talk about, really.
No,
we did assign ourselves homework. So
this is game discovery homework.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the problem. We have too many games. This is specifically games that we have purchased over the years.
This is not an existential problem of in the world there are too many games. This is the commonly felt personal problem of I have so many games that I have never even read.
We've blown past I have more games than I could possibly play to I have more games than I can read. That's fine.
Yeah.
This is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But we're going to try to remedy that by each episode. We're going to have some way to randomly select a game from each of our collections, and that we're going to go off and do a little reading, investigate the game, and come back with a game report, a little taste of what the game is about, and highlight the things you found most interesting about the game. I'm going to emphasize here that this is not a review. We're not here to critique games. We're not here to bring anyone down or anything like that. We are simply just going to celebrate what we love about the game that we ended up picking up, because that's what we want out of this.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. It's selfish in that we are also looking for, the little, I think, like I said many minutes ago, looking for the hidden gems or the arcane gems that are buried within these pages that will help us make our games, but also just learning things is fun, and having a structured reason to go into the archive is like helpful.
Yes.
So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to give you a little previously on where we assigned the homework.
All right, I'm going to roll. Ready?
I'm ready.
We're not going to have any sound effects because I'm doing this via computer. 62.
62. All right. Okay, let's see. Oh, God, how am I going to count? All right. How many are in this window?
Okay, got mine.
I have mine. Okay.
All right. What you got?
I have Land of Nod with 2 Ds.
Oh.
A game for 3 to 5 players by Paul Tarusov. I have absolutely no memory of why I have this game. It is a 23-page PDF, so this is achievable homework.
Achievable homework, that's good.
And let's see, it is inspired by The Pool, Other Kind, and a game that this person also wrote called Musette. So, this is in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, it is. Well, mine's in my wheelhouse as well. I gotta say, as a random selection, obviously we're gonna skew towards our wheelhouses, right? Like,
right.
We tend, but I do have a large variety of games, many of which you would not associate with me. But this one, you absolutely would. I've got from Spectrum Games, Stories from the Grave.
Yep.
And it's totally got an EC horror vibe to it. It's actually quite gorgeous. When did this come out? 2016?
I was going to say, this is a total 8.5 by 11 PDF generated from Word kind of situation.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But the creation date, it has no like publication date, but the creation date on the file is from 2010. So that feels about right for these references.
Designed and written by Cynthia Celeste Miller and Barack Blackburn. Yeah. And this game is hosted by the Grave Hag. So we have a horror host. Oh, this is good.
And we're back.
So, do you want to go first? What did you find?
First question. Did you do your homework?
I did do my homework.
Because I almost forgot, because this is the first time that we're doing it.
I was late last night. I was like, oh, dip. I had to do this homework. Mm-hmm. I very much enjoyed doing my homework, but I too had forgotten.
So we'll get better at that. Okay, let's see. I'm also, production note, I'm recording from Studio B today from my auxiliary location. So that also means that my referencing things, I need to pull it all up on a new machine. And I might sound different on other recordings. This is the first episode of a podcast. I don't know where else to say this. This is the first episode of a podcast. So in 6 to 10 episodes, we'll look back at this and go like, oh my God. So I'll go ahead and just apologize now for anything about audio quality or rambling or editing or whatever. We'll get through it together. Mm-hmm. All right. So my homework was this spelunking through my PDF folder to get to a game called Land of Nod with 2 Ds, a game for 3 to 5 players by Paul Tarusiv, I believe. Paul, if you're out there, I apologize if I messed up your name. I did a little bit of additional research to be like, where did I get this game? This is from the mid 2000s. I think the file creation date was 2010, I think I said. Yeah. There is a still existing wiki with this game on it, and with some additional notes and content and stuff. So I'll put that link in the show notes. There's dates for when it was last updated. So I think this is from like that file creation date might have been from some file transfer, because I think this is from 2008.
I think I remember the game coming out in the aughts.
The other place I found references was he was working on it. He was doing playtest reports and stuff on the Forge. So that's probably why I have a copy.
In those early days, establishing exactly when a game comes out in my brain doesn't, again, like we said in the beginning, you're involved in so many playtests, you don't remember, like, wait, was the game out when I played it? Or was this before it came out? Or, well, I shouldn't say you don't. I don't remember sometimes.
It's not that this is a playtest document. This is a game that is presented as, here are the rules, here's the game. And then at the end, there's some optional stuff that is specifically called out as not playtested. But it's also not like, this didn't like go to Kickstarter.
This is in the Ashcan years.
Yes, this is much more in the Ashcan hobbyist style, for lack of a better term. Anyway, Land of Nod is it's a game about replicating a certain story pattern. I think I said it when we were setting up, but in case it got trimmed out of the previously on, it calls out that its design was inspired by novels and films where multiple protagonists pursue their desires in independent plot lines, like Pulp Fiction, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Cryptonomicon, or the fantasy novels of Steven Erikson. And so it sets up a dynamic where your characters are never in scenes together necessarily. I mean, they can be, but it's set up to keep you apart so that your narrative threads overlap through interacting pieces of each other's storylines.
Oh, cool.
Which is really interesting. No, I'll put the link in the show notes. So this one is something that people can just look up. So I'm a structure guy. So I'm always looking at structure. And this game has really interesting structure, and I think is necessary for pulling out, I think, the arcane gem that is glowing here for me. So we each have an individual character, and there's actually 2 different setup systems for making the like little world and situation that you're in, both of which are very interesting and I like a lot, but we'll skip that for now. So you end up with, but there's not like a setting or like, we're just going to play in Lord of the Rings. Like, it's like meant to be a, let's build it all at the table thing.
Yeah. Everyone's contributing.
So we each have an individual character. When it's my turn, one of the other players will be the narrator for the turn. So there's a distributed GMing setup. Yeah. You're the narrator. I'm playing my character. So you do all the GM stuff for that turn, and I play my character. The other players don't have specific things. I mean, there's a lot of flex for like, hey, can you play the Burgomeister or like whatever? But there's not like assigned roles or anything for the other players. But the core mechanism here is that everyone has a number of coins or tokens, whatever. So if we're having a turn, I'm the character and you're the narrator.
Mm-hmm.
And our other friend, M is also playing. When M thinks there's an interesting thing going on that could have a dire outcome, moves to what's called a story challenge. When something is going on and it's like, oh, I want to see this be a story challenge, M is the one who slides her coin in to be like, now this is a challenge. So it's
interesting.
Yeah. So I think this is going to happen a lot for us. Like, I see a lot of this and I see a lot of that. So there's a overplayer-esque dynamic where the narrator is supposed to push and push and push, but the player, the protagonist in the scene, doesn't have any agency to push back. They can just make the situation fraught with their reactions, appealing to the other player to bring in the coin.
Throw a coin in. Yeah, I like that.
So that's really interesting. And then the resolution mechanic is with a deck of cards, and there's a relationship between your coins and the cards, and getting a certain number of cards to overcome the dangers that you face and stuff like that.
I think the appeal to a third party, there's a lot of ways to approach playing a role-playing game, and sometimes I often have a craving for, like, not particularly for me. Okay, let me put it this way. There's streaming, and people enjoy streaming, and they like watching other people play role-playing games. That's a thing that didn't exist. It kind of existed in our day. I remember reading blogs, and then eventually there were like actual play podcasts and things like that were, but they were nascent.
Twitch didn't exist when we started.
Yeah.
YouTube barely existed when we started.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so now that there are these, I would love to see some of these go in a more, for lack of a better term, a more sporting route where...
More like audience participation-y.
Yeah. There's obviously always, like, you're always exercising your creative muscles when you're playing a game or whatever, but like there's some times where it's like this situation here, it feels like not only are you doing that, but you have it like with a measurable goal. I want to get a coin out of someone rather than are we not entertained? And I'm not saying that all games should be like that or anything like that. I just think that is a field I would like to see pursued, just to see if anything I like comes of it. It could very well be that I just don't like anything that comes out of it, but like that's why we experiment, right?
Yeah. It's the audience thing. I mean, this is very resonant with me because like this is coming out of the same soup of influences that Annalise came out of.
Yes.
So I'm seeing some echoes there where it's like Paul doesn't reference it in the document, but like, so I'm not saying that like,
no,
I'm an influencer
we're all
or whatever.
In the same communities.
But I think I was coming from the same stew of influences.
Yeah.
And having some of these same concerns about like, what if a game did this? So same thing where it's like you have your character and you nominate someone else to run the scene for you. And then there's like the audience has stuff that they can do. And there's even some stuff that is a little in the same conversation as claims, which is in the same conversation as motifs from Swords Without Master.
Yeah.
Like, so this is a very continuous game with like our stuff, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
So it's very familiar. But the specific aspect of taking the agency for making the major story points.
Yeah, where we're going to focus.
That's actually removed from the protagonist player and put specifically on the audience.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to me.
Not even handed over to the narrator or whoever's in that like GM-y role.
Right. Well, it has a nice sleight of hand where it's like the GM is the GM like a D&D GM. The GM runs the world in that scene, right? So if they start throwing stuff at the protagonist that's just like totally out of pocket, either it's a breakdown of the social contract, right? And like that's one issue. But there's some text about like that player can be like, so can someone make this a story challenge, please? Like there's actually there's a release valve for like, oh, we actually have to go to some mechanics here. And the mechanics are not necessarily does it happen? Does it not happen? The subsystem there is all about like articulating, okay, what's the goal and what are the risks? And then like,
yeah.
And they're orthogonal. So like, can you get the goal and have all the risks hurt or not? Which again is very Annalise-y. Anyway, I think that's what surfaced to me as like playing with that dynamic of who's active in the scene and who has power over making it important. It was really interesting. And then there's one other little thing I wanted to call out just as a like something to keep in the back pocket. During the creation phase, one of the versions of the creation phase, you're basically going around and everyone is throwing stuff in to be part of the game that you're going to play before you make characters, right? So you can potentially be inspired by something someone else puts in or whatever. Mechanically, there's kind of an inbuilt, I guess now we would say it's a safety tool.
Sure.
You all start out the game with coins, and when you're doing this scene building or this world building, you all put in a coin. And if someone else throws something in that you don't like or that you don't want to be part of it, you take your coin out, and that vetoes that contribution, right? So it's kind of like an X card, kind of thing. But the rule is once everyone has taken their coin out, that phase ends and you move on. And I think something really interesting is in the idea of that ritual as a pacing mechanism, not necessarily as a content or safety mechanism. I mean, it can do both, obviously, but like there's something there, again, similar to the tension of like reaching out for the dice when playing Swords of the Without Master, where it's like you're kind of waiting for the right moment. If you're at the table and everyone's throwing stuff in about something, then like someone takes out their coin and you're like, oh.
Yeah.
It's reminded me of a game that I played at Go Play Northwest this year. It's a really, really beautiful game. It's essentially a storytelling game where you're on an airship and it goes through 3 seasons and you listen to music and you ask questions of each other during each season, and then you like write the answers down on the paper. It's very poetic, very beautiful, but there's a pacing mechanism there's a deck of cards with prompts, and everyone at the start of each season, each player draws a card. And then if you have an opportune time to put that prompt in as your answer to a question, it gets turned in. And then once all 3 have been turned in, that's the end of the season.
Oh, yeah.
And like that was it's really nice elegant
pacing.
and it gives enough choice to the player where like, is this the time?
Right.
And then there's a nice tension of, okay, if I'm the first person who puts it in, that means we start wrapping up.
Yeah.
That's a signal to everyone to start looking for ways to bring theirs in. But then if you're the last person, you have the control over like, how long do we go? And there's something similar with this coin mechanic where it's like whoever pulls theirs out first, you're like, we're entering endgame on the scene.
Right.
But you still have to wait for someone else to make the ultimate choice, and depending on how many players, how many like coins does it take before you get to that last person? Yeah. There's something there.
There's this thing about thinking about players as audience rather than active participants. And specifically, wait, I don't want to frame it like that because audiences can be active. But specifically what I'm saying is that you want to pull focus, right? Like where are you pointing the camera? Not, I mean, like this is adjacent to spotlight, like who's in the spotlight or whatever. But it's mainly like you want to do things that say, hey, this is important to the story, because these ritualized moments are the things that stick in our brain afterwards. We've done this in the game. Like you definitely remember beautiful descriptions, but like everyone remembers when you rolled that 1, when you like all you had to do was roll a 2 to win. I love when mechanics just like pull all the audience together for something that like the story would be doing anyways, but it's the same way when you add a soundtrack to a movie, right? Like it complements or contrasts or does what needs to, it does things about the tale that you're telling at the table. Ooh, that's a tongue twister.
So those are my arcane gem there.
Yeah, I dig it.
Plus that little, I'm going to be noodling on that for a while, that like pacing mechanic possibility. I think there's something there that could be used in lots of different ways. All right. How was your homework?
So I got, I'm going to get the title right because it's Stories from the Grave. This game has got that nice, gooey, EC horror comics mouthfeel to it, right? Like it's, the cover looks very much like the old horror anthology comics. A good touchstone would be like Tales from the Crypt or Creepshow, the Creepshow movies. Basically, the sort of stories where you watch somebody who's a bit of a douche, and you just kind of wait for them to reach their tragic, ironic, and satisfying end. This is designed and written by Cynthia Celeste Miller and Barack Blackburn. It's put out by Spectrum Games, copyright 2016, so a little more recent than about 8 years. Wow, this is about halfway between us and the game, The Land of Nod.
This came out just about when we were starting our last podcast.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so like I said, you're doing these old horror tales. You're going to be playing characters that are, okay, I'm going to say protagonists of the story, in that they're the central characters of the story. But like I said, oftentimes these are people that you want to see die by some gruesome means because of who they are and how they behave. The game very much plays into that aesthetic, not just in the way it looks, but like there's a nice little section in here where I'm trying to think, let me just, gratuitous content. So like it very much leans into the nature of these stories being, a lot of gore, rated R at least, basically. There's some interesting things in it. I dig how it has like this 3-act structure, and your characters, you roll to accomplish things. If you fail the roll, then the Gravekeeper tells you, what happened. If you succeed, then you get to say what happened. And in that middle zone, you get to decide whether you want to narrate your failure or have the Gravekeeper narrate your success, right? And that fits. I mean, like that's a thing that's in the we've seen that before and have it in our own games and in various places. But it just very nicely fits this genre. You got somebody who's like a doctor who's like a plastic surgeon who is just incredibly shallow and is trying to become the best plastic surgeon in the world and is experimenting on people or whatever. That's your protagonist, and you absolutely want them to. You want to narrate their failures, and you want the Gravekeeper to like make their successes horrible, right? Like because that's what you need out of it. And then if something has, I think they call it like grave consequences, where that your character can die, and you fail, you roll to see if you've been, something bad has happened that removes you from the game. But you don't ever do that in the first act, which is great. And so there's like a nice, we were just talking about pacing, but like adjacent to pacing, there's a nice like, okay, ramping up of the tension. We get closer and closer to the final thing. And then the two arcane gems that I think are in this one. And one is that they have, I believe they're called grave tokens, but they're basically like currency that you collect that make it harder for you to survive that bad roll.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and you just kind of like it gets worse and worse for your character. So that's a good one. And those show up for there's like a nice economy of like they go out into a pool and then you get to get them if you're like trying to do better on rolls and things like that, and then you end up spending them. But then the other bit is this like larger session to session one, right? These are anthology, much like yours was like disparate stories. You're telling like different horror stories. You're not really expecting the characters to survive or to continue.
It's not the continuing adventures of. It's like,
exactly.
Here are 3 stories. One's about the weird doctor. One's about a Mothman, and one's about like a person who like can't get out of a dream or something. Yeah,
exactly. I fell in love with a werewolf, that kind of thing. There's this sort of meta mechanic called skulls, which are used instead of stars. This is the rating that your episode got, your installment got, they call them. And to get skulls, there's a secret list of things that the Gravekeeper knows, and you have to like kind of guess at. You're driving towards.
Oh, I like that.
And they're based on like the kind of scenario that you're doing, and they have like a nice breakdown of several different scenarios that have that in there. Not like a scenario with like all the details, but like sort of the frames of scenarios. Story frames, they call them story frames, right? So like I don't want to give too much away because this is in the Gravekeeper section, but like one of them is like, careful what you wish for. And it's, you're playing somebody who really wants something and will go to any length to get it, which of course means that they're going to violate some social taboo that'll end up getting them killed. But then there are ones that are like where you're like a bunch of hapless teenagers in a woods being murdered, and you're not actually like trying to get them killed. You're trying to see how they deal with it, that kind of thing.
Is it something that the Gravekeeper picks before you play, or is it more like based on how we played, here's the things that you happened to hit?
So the Gravekeeper comes with a scenario or several, like because you're going to do, like I said, an anthology kind of thing. But that is hidden knowledge. That's part of it. Yeah, hidden knowledge.
I don't come to you and we start playing and you're like, and by the way, this is like teenagers in the woods getting killed scenario, though you might set up.
Yes. The idea is to lean into tropes on both sides. So that's it. It's like a communication. Like I'm leaning into the tropes as the Gravekeeper, and then you're leaning into the trope. Yeah. Once you figure out what it is, you start leading into it.
Once you recognize the pattern, oh, that's cool.
The one that's universal is the gratuitous content that I was just mentioning. Like you just do like eyeballs popping and things like, just the really gross
stuff,
gore or sex appeal or, whatever. And then the other thing is that these skulls, the amount you acquire determine the amount of grave tokens you start with the next time you play. So that's the continuation thing. Like, hey, we did really well, so we've got more of this other currency.
And in this case, doing really well is you really caught the vibe and you leaned into it.
Yes, exactly.
That's interesting.
I remember getting this game, picking this up because Brock Blackburn recommended it to me because I was on social media and I was just talking about how much. I think I was talking about the old Tales from the Crypt Master Book game from West End Games from the 90s. And I was like, I've had this game forever. I've never played it. And he was like, you should check this out. And I took one look at the cover and I grabbed it. And then, as often happens, I had to wait until we created a podcast before I read it. So, yeah, we'll throw a link in the show notes about where to grab it. I think it'll be like a link to Drive-Thru RPG or something like that. And, I'm going to play this game is what I'm saying. I need to give it a shot at some point.
Definitely sounds like the kind of game you'd play.
Yeah.
This is a game I would play at a convention. It's not really my core thing, but something in there about that kind of like, it's not competition really, but that kind of friendly challenge.
Yes.
So I have a thing, and I'm not telling you what it is because part of the game is you finding your way into it.
Yeah.
But my job is not to keep you from it. My job is to, I'm giving you all the clues, policeman, right? Like that's...
Yeah. It's like playing narrative taboo, right? Like you can't see the word.
But you're both like trying to get to the same place.
There's a full moon and he's looking hairier than he was before, right?
Right. It's a full moon and your mom makes a big deal about cleaning the silver.
Exactly. Yes. So, yeah.
Cool.
I'm digging this little homework thing that we've created for ourselves.
Well, it doesn't end here because now that we've picked out a couple gems for consideration, I think it means that it's time for us to get some new homework.
Yeah. So what are we doing here? All
right. So one complicating factor is I'm not on my main computer and I'm not close to my bookshelves. But I imagine that you, like me, have a library on, let's say itch.
Okay.
That also will prejudice things to be a little more recent.
Yeah. Now, the problem is, well, whatever we're going to do, I'm going to have to sort through a bunch of video games, which is fine.
Oh, yeah. I didn't think about that because I do not have any video games unless they were in bundles.
Yeah, that's how it happened for me. There's a few that I got on there, but it's fine. I can figure it out. We can sort it. So what should we do? Should we do I'll roll a d20. 10. Oh, sorry, 11. I forgot to add 1.
All right.
Because I did this off of...
Oh, and these also are not arranged alphabetically, so that actually is not doing what I thought it would.
It's okay. You're right. They are not arranged alphabetically. Well, should we go down 10 rows?
You rolled an 11 for yours?
Yeah, 11 rows.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's go down to the 11th row, but then pick whatever we want from those 4, because who knows what the options are.
Well, I have the D1 RPG, so I'm excited. It is a to be printed and then folded zine.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, okay. They got a PDF here too. That'll be easier to read on the screen. What's exciting is going to involve a Mobius strip.
Oh, cool.
We'll find out.
What I have picked from the 11th row of my itch.io page is the Shrike role-playing game by Alice the Candle. Sad Press Games, 2022. This is an early access edition. There's a little intro paragraph here. It is early evening above the airship the Shrike. Far below us, rich pine forests roll past. It is fine flying weather, and the skies around us for now are empty. Soon, pale miniature cliffs slip away beneath, and now we are over the vast dark sea. The sun's glow on the horizon fades. One by one, the stars come out, but they fail to illuminate the waves below. We are hurtling in the quiet darkness. We put on our lanterns. Our voyage has begun.
That's exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing the report.
Yeah. Well, it looks like there's a group version and there's a solo version.
Oh.
Well, I'll report back.
Mm-hmm. I'm looking forward to this.
And what is you have something that has to do with a Mobius strip?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. You were looking through things when I mentioned it. It is called the D1 RPG. So it is a one-sided die role-playing game.
Oh, that's right up your alley.
Yeah. I do like to reduce things down to, it's got a great chart on the back on how to convert a D6 to a D1. Snepshark.itch.io. Or SNEPSHARK. Snepshark.
Yeah, this is from sadpress.itch.io.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
All right, so we have our homework. So when we next speak, we'll report back about our games. And we have other things that we're going to talk about as part of the podcast as well. So I guess stay tuned. There will be more episodes. You can support the Unwritten Earths Symposium by heading over to patreon.com/unwrittenearths. We have Patreon levels starting at $3 a month, all of which get you into the Discord with a special little name. I believe that's called a role. I don't know how Discord works. Epi's going to teach me how Discord works as part of this whole thing. And we'd really appreciate your support as we get off the ground. Some of the levels will include each annual as a subscription. Like, you're basically subscribing to get the annual when it comes out through the Patreon as well, if you would like to do that. So, we know there's not a whole lot to hang your hat on about that yet, but that's kind of where we're going with the Patreon.
We'll get you there. You'll be excited.
You can find the podcast at unwrittenearths.fireside.fm, and you can find our website at unwrittenearths.com.
Mm-hmm. Earths is plural.
Earths is plural.
We did that to ourselves.
We don't have other stuff sorted yet. We're both on some social media. I'm on Instagram at ndpdesign.games and on Blue Sky at, I think I'm NDP Design, but that might change.
Yeah, everything might change.
And Epi, where can people find you on socials?
I am Epidiah wherever fine Epidiahs are sold. I'm Epidiah at dice.camp, and I'm going to investigate this Blue Skies situation. I might be joining that as well. Otherwise, join the Discord. We'll chat there.
We'll talk to you there. If you have questions for us or thoughts or feedback on the show, obviously we know it's early, but you'll be able to submit feedback on the Discord and also through the podcast website. So that's the unwrittenearths.fireside.fm. Let's see, what else?
Where can they find your games, Nathan?
My games are available at wherever fine NDPs are found. So my personal website is ndpdesign.com. That's where you can get the Worldwide Wrestling role-playing game, among others, as well as inquire about my freelance services if you're interested in visual design, layout, or game design consultation. Where can people find your games, Epi?
My website is dig1000holes.com, but I don't have a web store up there yet. So just look for Dig 1,000 Holes on DriveThruRPG or on itch.io.
Eventually, we'll be consolidating things.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have a better story for this in the near future.
This podcast is by us. Good job, us. Our music is by Will Yobst. Thank you, Will. I think we have one big question to answer at the end of every episode. Epi, have we made a new game yet?
Not quite yet. What do you think?
Tune in next time to find out.
I like how accusatory I sounded. What do you think, Nathan? No!
How dare you?